Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Church Coffee, Christianity, Conservatism, and Culture. Today I'm joined by Joe. Joe is the senior chaplain at the Albemarle County Regional Jail, along with running several other nonprofits and being a chaplain elsewhere. Joe, thank you for coming on.
So glad to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
We were already talking before we started recording, but how do you take your coffee?
I take it first thing in the morning. I make my own cappuccino, so I have to have that out of the gate. A little bit of brown sugar, not much, because I am part Italian, so it's supposed to be harsh. The rest of the day, if I drink coffee, it's black.
Whole milk for your cappuccino, I would assume.
Absolutely, 100%.
Give us your life story, especially what got you into prison ministry.
That's an incredible story. Life story is long. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I enlisted at 19 years old into the United States Navy, got out. I served 6 years. I met my wife my last year in there. I got married. We were married 36 years, three children, three grandchildren, doing really well. So things that really turned out extremely well. I married way up. So I just want to make that clear, way up. So it's all
Every
good.
good man marries up.
Way up, not just up. When people meet us, they look at her, they look at me, and then they look back at her like, really? You're, you're with this guy? But it's been absolutely incredible, and I'm enjoying it. What got me in the jail ministry is a kind of maybe not unique, but unusual to me because I wasn't looking. I didn't even know what a jail chaplain was, and that's being honest. I had no idea. I'm a seminary grad. I thought the pulpit was going to be it for me. It was not. I tried that,
Where
but I
did
did
you
ministry.
where did you
Go
go
ahead.
to seminary?
Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, Florida. And it was just, I got the degree, came out swinging, and realized quick that the pulpit was not me. I'm a trench guy. However, I did work church, I did work regular jobs. It just kept going around, but I was always involved in ministry it's been about 36 years. And one day I was just feeling complacent, not that anyone feels complacent in their spiritual walk or spiritual journey. And I really honestly there's been a tug in my heart because I had left the vocation as ministry and went and worked in the real world, but still did ministry on the weekends or wherever I was needed to preach or teach, but really worked at another job. And the tug was just always on my heart for whatever reason. I couldn't explain it. And I don't know if you remember the crime times that used to come out way back when people were arrested. They do this little publication, and I found myself praying for those
Well,
people.
they still do that.
Yeah.
You can still pick it up every now and then at
Yeah,
local
I
gas
found
stations.
myself
Yeah.
I found myself praying for people in there, sitting in a parking lot, in a gas station. I don't ask me why, I don't know. And I came home one day, just I'm like feeling complacent, and I literally turned my Bible. I opened it. I was by myself in my living room, and it flipped to Matthew 25, verse 35, and it said, "For I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes, you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." And my heart just exploded at that point. And I remember looking up and just that feeling inside him saying, "That's where I need you to go." And my response was, "You got to be kidding." I started laughing. I said, "What is this? How do you even start this?" I had no idea what it was to go in prison. So I take my dog to the vet a day or two later, and there's a big sign on the veterinary's wall, "Good News Jail and Prison Ministry," with a phone number on it. And I called that number, and it was Alonzo Mourning. And he was the chaplain. I told him who I was. He said, "Come on by." 2 weeks later, I took a tour. 2 months later, I was a volunteer. 2 years later, I was the chaplain. That's how it happened. Was not looking, but it was this tug, this call. And when I got in there, my mind was just blown. No idea what I was walking into. No idea what a chaplain did. I
And
just
that
knew
was here in Charlottesville.
Charlottesville, at Alamo,
How did you
Charlottesville,
make it
Virginia.
from Orlando to Charlottesville?
We came up here because the church hired me, Grace Community Church. I called up there. They were looking for someone to start their youth program. They needed an assistant pastor. It was a church plant from Trinity. And we drove up here. We met them. They hired me. And as soon as I graduated, we moved right to Charlottesville. That was in 2020. So we never left. And I'm still part of that church. I'm still at the same church.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Dave and Tucker started D&T Mobile Detailing with one goal: deliver top quality car care you can count on. What began as a summer project has grown into a thriving business thanks to the support of our amazing clients. They've built D&T on hard work, honest feedback, and serious attention to detail. They bring premium detailing straight to your driveway, convenient, reliable, and always done right. Experience the D&T difference. Book your appointment today. Contact available in the show notes. And now, back to the show.
Good man.
But can you give us kind of sketch a life for the inmates day to day, like treatment, staff, food, what they do in their free time? I'm
I
sure there,
think
I'm sure there's some idea that people get from movies and TV shows, but I'm sure there's also much more mundane realities of being an inmate.
And there is, and that's why I encourage tours. We give tours all the time. And it's something people could reach out to me and we'll give a tour. And I think people need to see what it actually looks like inside because I can show you things and tell you stories about in there that you're not going to hear or read about outside that jail. One thing, it's a holding facility. So people don't realize that there's no courtyard, there's no cafeteria. You're in a cell or you're in a general population housing. The food comes, everything comes to you, food, clothes, all of that comes to you. So if you're in certain parts of the jail, there may be 12 of you, two to a cell, but all you are there 24/7. You don't leave unless you're going to a class or a Bible study like we offer. But if there's lockdown like COVID, you're in your cell 24/7. You don't move. So you can understand despair gets pretty deep. And when COVID hit, it got unbelievably deep. But that day-to-day routine is tough because you're awaiting sentencing or trial. It's a holding facility. So anxieties are always high. So you keep things close to the vest, right? You're not going to talk about a lot of things until your court comes up. And if the court is delayed, stress level comes even higher. So day to day, what we try to do is they offer programs, GEDs that they do, educational programs. We offer biblical study type programs to try and help bring everybody down to a more calm level. And that's one of the major rules of the chaplain is to bring people down so they're not so anxious and things like that. So it's most people, I think the average maybe 10 to 14 weeks, maybe 16 weeks, maybe on average, but some have been there over a year. And like I said, others are awaiting sentencing or trial. So some do get sentenced and they go down the road for 15, 20 years, whatever that is. So we're really like, we have everything from DUI to murder and everything you read about, we see that inside that jail. So day to day could vary. Sometimes it's quiet. We like quiet, but sometimes it's not. Tensions are high. But they have iPads now they can use.
What
I
would
know
be
that
what would be something that creates tension among the inmates in our regional jail?
I think there's tension sometimes between inmates. It could be about a lot of things. You got to remember it's a subculture, so people are bucking for position, right? There could be some of that. It's something simple like someone receiving more gifts than you get from the outside, packages coming in, or you're able to buy food from the commissary and they can't, or things like that you're stuck in there. So there's a lot of different things for tensions, or if you're well, they won't keep people who are rival gang members in the same location. They'll be separated. So family matters, things like that. Personal issues may come up. Someone may use that against you as well, just to tease you or to get you hyped up. That happens, and that might cause anxiety in a fight. It just makes you fight over the little things because in there, more things are valuable than realize, like stamps, very valuable. They're little things that we take for granted that are like gold in there. And if someone else has it, why does he have it and I don't? You know, and so you can see elevation of tensions and that like that as well.
Yeah, I remember I actually wrote my former environmental science teacher who got arrested on charges and then convicted of making and distributing child pornography. Uh, I was I was never part of that. That was never traumatic for me. I was already long an adult when that had happened. But I wrote to him in the county jail for several years actually, and remember him saying that stamps were the currency, kind of the inmate currency there. And then when he got convicted and was sent to a federal lockup,
Oh,
sardines were the currency there.
Yeah, it varies, and that's why I just remind us that it's a holding facility. So I think tensions can get a little higher there because you're not really sure who to align yourself with, what's going on. And the funny part, it's not funny, but when I first got there, I used to hear, "I didn't do it, and I'm getting out next week." I was like, that was like the two famous phrases, and I was like, okay, we'll see how that works out.
How it
So
how was treatment by staff to the inmates? Again, I'm trying to counter any, or not counter, but bring down any perceptions people might
they're
have.
phenomenal. That's why I do tours because you need to see it because they're men and women in there, and their lives are basically at risk every day. It is, and I could tell you stories of things I've seen and things that have happened in there, things you're not, like I said, you won't read about, but they are amazing. It took me probably, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years to establish a really strong rapport with the correctional officers and the staff because when I came in, I'm not sure what the situation was, but it was really like they were more like hands off. You're for the inmates. We don't need that. And I kindly reminded them I'm their chaplain as well. And when I got there, there were 502 inmates and 160 staff, and me, I was the only guy. So I had to really reach out and do things for the correctional officers, like have churches bring in baked goods, put in the break room so they could have with little messages telling them how much we appreciate them and things like that. So once that rapport was established, man, I saw one female officer reading a Bible with an inmate between the bars, going through a passage together. I had officers come to me and say, "Look, I think you need to talk to this guy that just came in." I suggested to him that he see the chaplain. Or one officer came up and said, "Hey, do you have a Bible for this guy who just we just booked?" I said, "Yeah," and he said, "I want to take it to him though." I'm like, "Absolutely." So that happens often. I get calls all the time from the correctional officers now, or emails or text messages. They have my phone. "Hey, I think you need to come up here. We have a situation. I think you'd be perfect. We need you to," and I do. So they are marvelous people. They do their job. When COVID hit, I can remember talking to the officers. One in particular, he just said to me, he says, "Look, we may die, but we're going to do our job like we're supposed to. We got kids, we know that, but our job is here." And they did their job. They just did it. And I was in there with them, and I just saw them in a light that most people just do not see. They really do. They do their job, and they're very compassionate in a lot of ways, and open to talking about scripture, open to talking about a lot of things. And you just don't see that. That's why I do the tours.
I'm sure inmates at first are kind of like when they first meet you or hear about you, like are they a little, I would assume they are a little like skeptic or a little standoffish, but what is your rapport with inmates first as they get there, and then how does that relationship develop?
I think one of the best compliments I ever got, and this doesn't always happen, is I got a call up to intake where they're bringing them in, and somehow this guy already knew something. He said, "Hey, I heard you're the chaplain," and I said, "Yeah." He said, "I hear you're legit. That's the word." And I said, "Not sure how to take that, but I'll be straight with you. That's it." So that took some time even with the inmates because they spread the word. And there were times, I've been threatened. There's no doubt about that. I had an inmate just, he was going to do something to me when he got out and find me. And believe it or not, even the chaplains. And two inmates down in the cell told him to shut up. And he said, "Dude, don't be doing that. That is the chaplain, man. You watch how you're talking." And the guy calmed down. I've had a lot of instances like that where guys get angry at me. I've had a food tray thrown at me. I've been called all kinds of names. But I'll come back the next day and the next day and the next day to that same person. And some of the stories that people I tell, the guy was so angry, and then he found out who I was, and then he just started coming down to where he actually apologized and said, "How could you help me? I need help. What could you give me to read?" But that's the point. Don't get caught up in the noise. You got to listen for the whisper. And the whisper is God's whisper, putting people in front of you that He wants to reach through you. So if you get so caught up in all the noise that's going on there, you're going to miss out. I learned that pretty quick. And once what I teach my new chaplain or people who come in, volunteers, you got to remain constant. Most of these guys haven't had a constant iota of anything in their lives. It's all over the place. But if you remain a constant, as the former chaplain told me and sat me down, he says, you will become a part of their lives. They'll bring you in to their lives if you remain this constant because they're begging for something solid. And if you're so caught up in the noise, you never see it and you never become effective in their lives. So that rapport is established between inmates, and most are very respectful of my position and who I am.
You've already mentioned that the inmates have iPads, which my eyebrows went pretty high on. What are some other amenities that inmates have there?
That's a great question. I know there's phones in there. I know there's iPads in there. And honestly,
And
that's
so
their,
to be sorry to interrupt, to be specific,
sure.
like those iPads sound like you made it sound like they're given to the inmates. Those aren't
They're in the
contraband.
cells. They're right
Yeah,
in the
okay.
cells, right? But they're monitored. There's probably delays on them, and money. It costs money probably to send messages, or you can watch podcasts on there. I think there's a whole list of things on iPad they can get into. That's not my strength. I don't even go into that. What they do, I know they're on the phones. I know they're on the iPads. I know they have visitation stuff and all of that. I know that's their televisions. They have their TVs up there, one TV that everyone can see. So there are things there that keep them.
Gym, I feel like that's another pretty high level thing that most people assume that prisons and jails have, but
There's
no.
what you can see. There's a gymnasium. You can see from 64. It's the little slotted windows. That's general population. The gym is right there in the population with the classroom. They don't leave from there. But even that gymnasium has a screen that's open to the elements. So if you're in general pop, you can have access to that a little bit more. If you're in the isolation block, or if you're in more of the restricted area for some of the bad boys, I say, there's one gym they may get out a couple hours a week to go in there, but there's not like you just decide you're going to go into that kind of gymnasium, except in general pop, it's there. But general population is more, everyone gets along. Let's just put it that way. Better than people who are in the isolated section or the restricted area, things like that. So there's some exercise there, but it's not what you think. It's just not this big courtyard. You go out and get some sunshine. There is no outdoors. There's none of that. So,
You've
yeah,
already
go
mentioned
ahead.
food gets delivered to inmates.
Mhm.
How is the food?
I'm a Navy guy, so comparatively, I'm not sure. I haven't actually eaten the food off the tray, but I know it's the Department of Corrections. I guess they meet all the standards that are required. I think if you ask the inmates, they will tell you it's probably not top of the line. I would have to say that's probably true. I think
Hospital,
that's
military, and prison food all has kind of the ring of like
it
you're
does.
getting you're getting your nutrition.
You're getting your nutrition, and I think there may be something in that down the future. I think there's something to healthy food into someone's body that helps everything, and I agree with that, but it's just not my area. But I think if you talk to some inmates, they would tell you that the food is probably bland, let's say the least. It's just probably not the best food.
And now a break to hear from one of our sponsors. Are you tired of stepping in your dog's backyard landmines? Are you unable to pick up after them, don't have time, or simply don't want to? Let Scoopity Doo take care of it for you. They scoop when you can't. Please see the show notes for contact information. And now, back to the episode. Give us some success stories from your time as a chaplain.
There actually are several, but I'll just mention a couple, maybe one or two. I know there was one girl inside who came in that was man, got busted on some drug charges and stuff like that. And she came to faith inside. She started coming to Bible studies, and a lot of the other female inmates were surrounding her and actually preaching to her at night and reading scripture to her at night in the cell. And she came to faith, and we baptized her inside. In fact, we just baptized 28 inmates on Good Friday inside the jail. Baptized her, and she got out. And a few months later, maybe I should say maybe 7 months, 8 months, maybe a little longer than that, I had to go to a graveside and help with a ceremony of a female inmate who had gotten out and got shot and killed. It was a big story here. That one who got shot and killed, we also baptized the same we baptized this girl. So she was at the graveyard when we were doing the burial, and I saw her, and I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm doing okay, you know. And she said she was pregnant. And she goes, I changed my life. Things are going great. And I said, just keep me posted. Well, after that, I get a phone call from her. And she just said something to me like, I want apologize if something happens. I don't want you to be disappointed in me. I said, what's going on? She goes, I may have to go back in. I said, what do you mean? She says, I can't meet restitution. 7 months pregnant, and she couldn't afford to pay back the courts what she ordered. So I called the probation officer, and she said, yeah, she's working 2 jobs trying to pay this back. And I said, well, they really put her back in. She said, it's 50-50. I said, you're kidding. So I made a couple phone calls. By the end of that day, I had the full restitution, went and paid it down at the courthouse. And I just remember someone from the courthouse asking me, do you know this person? I'm like, what does that matter? And this person said, well, I find these people don't pay back what you give them. And I looked at this person funny and I said, it doesn't matter. That's not what this is. And I heard someone in the background say, hey, man, brother, you just keep doing what you're doing. And I walked out the courthouse. I made a couple more calls to the ladies at the church, and they surrounded this girl. And when that baby was born, she brought it to our church, and I get to help hold it. And it was extremely emotional because it could have been totally different. And this group of ladies surrounded her. I saw her not that long ago. She's still working. She's doing great. She's doing phenomenal, getting her life together. But that could have turned pretty quick. And those are the kinds of stories what people don't get as well, because 95% of the inmates in that jail are coming back into our community, which means at your church, one of those folks may be sitting next to you. So this is not a church problem, it's a community problem. The recidivism is like 85 to 90% within 5 years, everyone's coming back. That much. So we have to work at it. But there are many stories like
Real quick, just to interject, what do you think? What do you think would be some practical ways to reduce recidivism?
that's a great question, man. We're working on that. I don't know if there's actually one solution. You could say educate, you can say all you want with that, but for me, it's a matter of the heart. You've got to change that individual's heart first. That's got to change because then the vision changes. And I think once folks see that, they really want to try and keep moving forward, but they just don't know how to. And then you've got to get a group of people to surround the individual. It's a village. It takes a village. That's what I say. It's going to take a village to help reduce recidivism, and that village just pick one or two lanes. You're not going to solve everybody's problems. What are the lanes you want to stick in to help an individual walk the next couple miles when they post incarceration to get them back into the community? Some of it's education, but some of it matters the heart, and some of it is support. Who they surround themselves with, it's a big deal.
And now a break to hear from one of our sponsors. Are you tired of stepping in your dog's backyard landmines? Are you unable to pick up after them, don't have time, or simply don't want to? Let Scoopity-Doo take care of it for you. They scoop when you can't. Please see the show notes for contact information. And now, back to the episode. What are some practical challenges ministering to people inside?
I think the close to the vest thing is challenging because they just don't want to open up fully, which I understand. So I think a lot of anger, you have to wait like till that settles. Like I told you, some people come in, you don't know if they're high off something, if they're just angry, they're just tense, and they want to scream because they may be losing their job, they may be losing their family. There's a lot of stuff going on, man, when people get in there. So you got to just bite your tongue. You got to listen a lot more than you talk, and just kind of see where the pain is, and just stay quiet for a little bit. And so that's some of the, and especially tendencies with pastors or people coming in. You want to fix it, and I remind people there's one Savior. You're not it. Neither am I. And we have to just be compassionate, and we have to listen to what's going on. That's really some of the challenging things on our side. And two is don't get caught up in that noise. You have to look beyond that anger. You have to look beyond what they're maybe even saying to you. And that can be challenging because some of the things can be real mean. And you can get in there and say, well, why am I even here helping this person? They just told me to do whatever. They said some nasty things. And I can see that can lead people in the wrong direction and it can get frustrating.
we've talked a little bit about amenities, but what are some of the books you see inmates typically reading?
The big one was Left Behind series. That's huge. I had to get all 13 volumes or whatever it is. It was one
Why
of
is that big?
I think it's because it has the whole Book of Revelation feel, the Armageddon, the rapture. Men are enthralled with that. They're just like, bam, the devil, God, all this stuff coming down, and it just get. But what that does is because I started a library for that type of stuff, and I have a book cart guy now who's very good with the scriptures and how to talk to people. It opens the door for dialogue. Doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. What matters is if there's a door for dialogue through a series like that, because they'll have questions. Is this really happened? Where do they get why, this biblical stuff, is that really true? And where is that in the Bible? Bam, there you go. Right. There's an open door. And that's why we push the books like that. But the Left Behind series is probably the big one. And a lot of C.S. Lewis stuff I push out there.
Space trilogy or just the general apologetics of Lewis?
Lewis is the Chronicles of Narnia is the big thing. That's where it starts. I had a girl in there that we got her this Bodhi Thani series books. I asked my wife, good Christian fiction stuff, we go for women. We started that. This one girl, man, she devoured every book that I could get. And I said, she said, have any other recommendations? And I gave her a C.S. Lewis book. It might have been the Screw Tape Letters. And then she said, I had never even heard of this guy, but man, could he write? Do you have anything else? I said, I do. So I gave her every C.S. Lewis book I had on the shelf and then got her to her Bible study. And then I'm told, I had witnessed firsthand, her life changed as she came to faith. And she had never heard.
Reading Chronicles of Narnia to my daughter right now, and it's probably
Yeah.
been 15 years since I last read them, so it's almost like I'm reading them again. And man, it's so pregnant with just rich and deep and broad theology. Like he knew how to write, but he also knew how to like envelop ideas so digestibly. It's
It's
so good.
incredible. It is. And then there's a couple other series, and we put Tim Keller books in there. People like
Harry Potter.
I haven't put a Harry Potter one in there, but no one's asked for it. But that would be another series. I didn't see a lot of Harry Potter books. There was a
The
local
the
author. Go ahead.
the one when I was researching to send my former high school teacher, a book. Since he was an intellectual, I wanted to send something a little bit more highbrow. So I actually ended
Yeah.
up sending him Brothers Karamazov, just of the kind of like introspective themes of what's going on in that book. A lot of like, internal dialogue and wrestling with what you've done wrong. Do you think that is a good
But
book?
it
Probably
depends.
not in general, right? You got to know your audience.
Yeah, and you have to know your audience, and the average reading level is not high. So there's an older gentleman there. I have to get the children's version of Chronicles of Narnia or a children's Bible. So you have to, again, you have to listen, watch, and find out where these folks are and come in a way that they understand. This one older gentleman, he was afraid to admit or embarrassed that he couldn't read. His reading level was so low. So I snuck him a Chronicle of Narnia. It's just me and him, not in front of anybody. It was just me and him one on one. And every time he finished one, he would give it back to me. I'd give him the second one. And we started that way. And sometimes it's even through crossword or word search is a big thing, another door opener for people who like word search. It starts a conversation. But
There's a really good BBC radio play, both of Chronicles of Narnia and of Lord of the Rings. Are they allowed to listen to CDs or
we don't do
MP3s?
the CDs anymore. There might be something on an iPad or something like that they can because it's a long story. A lot of the mechanical stuff inside the CD players, things just started missing.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful with that because you need to treat it more like a max security. And there are all kinds of things that can happen with weapons. There was a guy who put a shank inside the spine of the Bible in my class. So I didn't know it. These two guys over from me. I got called into the superintendent's office, and there was the Bible I gave him. There was the shank right down the back side of the spine. So, there's I just say that I keep that Bible, by the way, just to remind me. But when we deal with people, you just have to be aware of your surroundings, know who they are, listen to what they're saying, and then try and find a way to communicate with them where they're at, because Jesus would do that. Exactly what Jesus, meet them where they're at instead of trying to pass judgment or, oh, I can't talk to that person. You have to find a way to do that. And books is a great way.
Outreach from Muslims to inmate population has actually risen pretty dramatically over the last 20 and 30 years. I've actually interviewed a Muslim who came to faith in ADX Florence. That's the highest supermax prison in the US proper. Do you see any of that on the ground at the jail? And even if not, what's your take on that kind of ministry in general as a Christian chaplain?
I mean, that's a great question. And I tell people, they're the guys I see in there are always searching for something. Okay. There's something to get your footing on. And what I see at times, I don't want to say genuine, but I do want to say genuine. People who are really scared will go back to their roots. And if they're raised Christian, they'll go back to their what they were raised, because that's where they feel they need to go. I've had Muslims the same way. They may not have lived it all their lives, but now they're incarcerated. They're going right back to their roots, and that's great. So I meet them there. We have the Kufis, we have the Quran, and I meet them there. But what I see in there, I think probably maybe a handful are legitimate about their faith, and then there are others who may claim it just for position, right?
Who
They
are Muslim?
may or may not be, or may become
Yeah.
Muslim while they're in there. But then once Ramadan is over, they're no longer Muslim, right? So I see that. But even those folks, I meet them where they're at, because the conversation really has to get into the heart. It's not like, here you go, I'm going to serve you, blah, blah, blah. I want to know why. Let's dialogue about this. If they don't want it, it's fine. But I'm telling you, there's not a Muslim, atheist, non-Christian, Christian that hasn't asked me to pray with them. I find that very interesting. And by their request, because they're rooted in a house of cards for the most part. They're not understanding what forgiveness really is. What is forgiveness? Biblically based, right? The doctrine of the atonement, the doctrine of substitution, his life for yours. How do you address sin and forgiveness? It always comes down to that. I don't care who it is. And that's where I meet him. I say, I'll meet you at the trough. And I'll say, what's the trough? And I'll give him the story of the prodigal when and I'll tell him to read it, and then we'll discuss it. And when he's eating the pig slop and he realizes he got himself there, and he realizes this, and his first thought is, I can go back to my father. I can go home. That's where I'll meet you. And we can walk that journey together. And
Do you have Tim Keller's Prodigal God?
we do. I do. Tim Keller's a book is in there all the time. That's some of the stuff that we use. Josh McDowell, all those kinds of things that we want to give folks the opportunity to read, and that's why we have the Bible studies. We have various levels of studies as well. So, I don't find a problem with a Muslim or Jehovah's Witness or whatever, everything like that, because if they want to talk about this, that's fine with me. I want to ask them questions from my point of view, not try and prove this, and this. Well, tell me about how, in your faith or whatever, how you've forgiven. Obviously, you've committed sin. You believe in that. What do you do with that? Do you have a scale? And how do you know you're forgiven? I just want to know that. How, if I'm going to come into your faith, explain to me how this works for my own life. And that just creates a dialogue. It's not a slam. It's let's just talk and let's get down, because what you'll find out is there's pain. There's pain, deep pain. And the backstories would blow your mind. What some of these folks had to grow up in. I want remind people who are in there, you're not there to fix anybody. You can't do that. And you're not in there to swing a 50-pound Bible. You're not the savior. There's only one. And he can reach them at a level we can't. Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan's on the move inside that jail. 100%. Always moving.
Amen. Amen to that. Are people in jail and inside, are they treated better or worse when they get baptized, when they start preaching Christ or claiming Christ? or is
I
it kind of
think
just really depends on the person?
I think, and that's the beauty of this, because we just did the baptisms, and people say, and I've heard this so many, well, everybody finds God in jail. I've heard that in a courtroom. I've heard all that stuff. They go out to me, and yeah, well, one, I didn't know God was lost, so you didn't find him. He reached you, and yeah, some people do. He gets a hold of their hearts inside, and amen to that, right? He grabs them. But the challenge, you got to remember where we're at. We're in the enemy's den. That is the enemy's lair. There's if you don't believe in spiritual warfare, man, one, you haven't read the Bible. Two, you need to come inside there because you'll feel it. You will feel it deep. There's a warfare in there that is just beyond what you will see in I think in anywhere outside that jail. It's heavy. And so we remind them, you've just now declared your allegiance with Christ. Guess who's coming after you the second you walk out this door? Right? You're going to face opposition, and they do. But what I found is the guys, when they become Christians inside or they got baptized, they bond together and they stick together. They start reading together. Then they start inviting other inmates to them. And so God is using them. So, two questions I ask people when they come in: how do you see God in your incarceration? And while you're here, can He use you? And usually it's no and no. I didn't see him at all. Or sometimes, yeah, he's been warning me all my life. But then when the transformation takes place, they actually believe that God can use them while they're in there, and he does. Those folks are the ones that are going to reach everyone else in the jail. It's not me. They're the ones that the Lord's using as his hands and feet in here because he's there with that group all the time and they're able to draw people in. So that's what I see. But yeah, they face some opposition once they become Christian in a way that is expected.
What is your stance on, if you have any, or if you've thought about it, on the death penalty versus life in prison, and also what about just solitary in general? It sounds like there's solitary at ACRJ. Just give us a
There,
kind of your thoughts on those.
I've got mixed views. I'll kind of leave it. I'm a military guy, so my position is I just deal with what's in front of me. The states have their laws, the country has their laws. I'm just there uh, with that. I thought at one point I may have had one side that I leaned towards or the other, and now it's just it is what it is. I still have my job is to get people in front of the ultimate judge acquitted through Christ. So that's how I have to look at that in the heart and really nothing else. I don't get caught up in all the other stuff. I have enough in front of me to do the isolation part. I've asked some inmates in there, and they're like, "Don't take me out of here because if you put me in general pop, I'm going to cause enough trouble to get back in here. I want to be here alone. This is what I want. I'm comfortable here." Not everybody feels that, but there are some inmates that do. They just don't want to be bothered. They like their own little place. So I think in some instances you do it for safety reasons. Sometimes you do that, or if someone's going to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. If you've got to, safety is got to be number one, 100% safety. It has to be, no matter what that is. Sometimes you got a split second to think, and sometimes longer than a second's too late, and something happens and someone's hurt themselves, and you've read it in the paper. People have died in there. That's the reality of this. So it's quick. It's easy to sit back and judge what's going on in there or judge this or this. But until you've actually walked those shoes and are in there every day and see what it's like, sometimes you got to make quick decisions for the safety of everybody else. So that's where I am at with that. That's facilities rules. Again, I go in isolation. I talk to people in there as well. So, and they get the Bible as well, and we talk as well. So there's no place I can't go. And there's some deeper conversations even in that scenario.
What are the main challenges when a person gets out? It's kind of obviously getting a job and finding a place to live, but what are maybe
Uh,
maybe talk to our listeners a little bit about stuff that we might not assume or know about.
It's where do you, yeah, because if you lose your license, you got to get your license back, right? You've got to get a job. Well, if you're a felon, right? You got to fill out an application. What if you don't know how to? You got to live somewhere. All these things. transportation, living arrangements, and food. How am I getting it? And I don't want to go back to the environment I was in that
And
got me here in the first place.
how probable when inmates get out of ACRJ is that accessible to them, both
I
immediately and
think
in just in the first weeks?
I think there's some accessibility from what I know, from the folks I deal with outside, but a lot of times there's a piece of paper, call a phone number, or go here, you got to be here. I don't know how to get there. I got to walk from the jail just to get to downtown because I have no family. I have no one's going to pick me up. So I'm walking. So how am I going to get over here? So I don't know if there's opportunity there. I think once they get there, but I think the caseloads are so large from what I've seen, a lot of people are missed. And that's why, we do some other things with people when they get out to help them get on their feet with work. There's a group of us that kind of work together. I work real closely with some people in Region 10, and they'll call me and they say, this person's really got a job, but they have nowhere to stay. How can we help house them? So I don't know how readily accessible it is. I think there's stuff out there, but can more be done? Yeah, but be more efficient with it. I guess the word I'm saying is got to be more efficient. And I think some things are out there that you can go to that provide that. I don't know if it's the one step thing they do outside. There's a where people get together and there's opportunities for people to go and see what's out there for them to access. But I'm not sure that's that reliable all the time.
What are some practical advice that you would give either people coming out of seminary or just the pastor? Because you yourself said you had no idea about going into this. If people, a seminarian or even just a pastor who also doesn't have any idea about prison ministry, what would be just some practical advice you give them?
Get involved in it. Do it. You can volunteer. You can teach inside. I recruit pastors all the time to do an 8-week course. Just get in there because this passage that I read out of Matthew 25, he lists 6 categories, right? He lists 6 categories. Like, you fed me when I was hungry, you gave me water when I was thirsty, you took me as a stranger, you clothed me when I was naked, you came to the hospital when I was sick, you came to the prison. My Bible, out of those 6 listed, doesn't say in parentheses, pick 3 and you'll be okay. There's 6 areas he mentions, and prison is one of them. To me, I don't think it's optional, especially if you're a pastor and seminarian coming out. Get involved in that. Just take a look and see what it's like first, and then you can make a decision from there. But don't assume you know what it's like in there until you actually go in there. Then you can share that experience with others. That's what I would advise them. Get plugged in somewhere, at least even if it's for a volunteer temporarily, but do something.
Is there a book or documentary you'd recommend for people who want to just better understand prison and jail life, especially one that might be somewhat analogous to ACRJ?
You want the truth?
Yeah,
The Bible. That's the book. And they'll say to your kid, I said no, because you need to understand what the Bible teaches about mercy and compassion. And I think that's a great place to start. We don't know, wouldn't know a lot about the idea of mercy and compassion if we didn't know about the thief on the cross or the parable of the vineyard owner who hires at 6, 9, 12, 3, and 5, and then pays that guy at the end of the day in front of everybody the same wage. And that parable is about salvation. It's offered to the one who grew up in church or to the one like the thief on the cross who dies the last second and comes to faith. The point is salvation is offered in the gospel as the right to everybody. And if you want to understand jail ministry, you need to understand that. There are some people in there that have done some bad things. The Bible is very clear about compassion, forgiveness, and mercy, not justifying things that people do. But Jesus met people right where they're at, and their forgiveness level is deeper than we can go. And yet he asks us to love our enemies and forgive those who persecute us. And you think, yeah, well, that's good. That's nice. Well, when you come face to face with people who have hurt people, in one of my cases, I became friends with an inmate in there in one of my classes, older gentleman who helped me out a lot with the younger inmates get involved in Bible study. I got called to his cell one time, and he just got diagnosed with cancer. He had 60 days to live. They were going to let him out. And 60 days later, I found his obituary, but he was murdered. And the guy that did it was up at ACRJ. So guess what? I needed to go up and give that guy the same gospel. Yeah, it just opened my eyes that it's the same cross. And that's a level of compassion and mercy I don't think people truly understand. And you have to go to the cross, and that's in the Bible. You have to understand that first and foremost. And that's where I'll leave that at. Understand that kind of ministry.
What are some on the ground practical ways a person can help both people in jail and in the ACRJ, but also when they get out?
Well, I think that I mentioned it. And we've had several occasions where a group of men surrounded one guy and they got him work and they just were with him and held accountable with him throughout and walked the process with him. If you're in a church, find a way, contact someone like me or something like that and say, hey, we'd like to help as a group. No single person can do this. But if you want to help, there's some mentorship. How do I mentor? How does a woman could mentor a young lady getting out? That's one way. A guy, I'm mentoring probably two guys that I had inside maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I still speak with here. They're here local, they're out, and we stay in communication constantly. And I still ask them some tough questions. So trying to mentor someone, that's a way to help. Not just handouts. This is not just let me give you this. It's let me put a part of my life into yours. Let me give you some of my time. If you really want to do this, those are ways you can help, and it's time. How much time are you willing to give to someone? And not, well, I give him 3 shots, my hands are clean now, right? Three strikes, he's out again. Because it's difficult. There's a lot of garbage and baggage that comes with some of these folks when they get out. There's a lot of hurt in there still, and a lot of things they got to work through. So they need a village.
You run a nonprofit, you're the senior chaplain. What ways,
Mhm.
if people want to get involved, can they contact you?
HopeSeville.com. It's something I started.
I will drop that direct link in the show notes below.
Yeah, there was a female inmate who was about to give birth, and she was terrified. And went up to her cell, prayed with her. They took her to the UVA. She had the baby. I went there probably a day and a half later, blessed the baby while she was holding it, blessed her, and then watched them take the baby out of her hands, put her in protective custody, and put her back in the cell less than 48 hours after giving birth. I was livid. I was really upset. And I said, where's that kid going? And it was social services. And I contacted them. I said, what do you need? And they said, diapers, formula, duffel bag filled with all that stuff. And so I did it and started the foundation or a nonprofit called Hope. Hope is Everything. And it's at hopeseville.com. We gave 250 foster kids Christmas gifts this past Christmas. We help with restitution, buried a couple inmates who died when they got out, had no family for burial costs. We don't think about that. So the things that fall between the cracks that I saw as a chaplain, as the chaplain inside, I want God again put this in my lap. I need you, want you to minister to these people that are forgotten. They're falling between the cracks. And I said, okay. And lo and behold, it's growing strong. And if you want, there's a place on the site. You just say, hey, I want to volunteer. My information is there. And we're doing a ton of stuff, man. Just do a ton. We just did a kayak race. We're doing a golf tournament. We're doing a ton of stuff that you can get involved in. It'd be great. Love to have you.
And then you also, it sounds like you give tours of
I do.
ACRJ.
Yeah, and if you want to give my email address or cell, that's fine with me. They can text me and say, "Hey, I'd like to do a tour," because I set them up every other week and things like that, certain days. And if they want to do a tour, absolutely, I have no problem giving my information.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us this week on Church Coffee. Again, if you want to volunteer or get involved in any way, Joe's contact and email will be below. And Joe, bless you and God bless your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
We'll see everyone next week on Church Coffee. Our album art was done by my wife, and our theme music was composed by TJ Stokes.